Good evening, it's March 4th. I'm Leandra Bernstein, and this is A World in Review. Today, the 6 LaRouche Democratic candidates issued a joint statement now posted on the LaRouche PAC website titled, "Tyrants Beware, the Mass Strike is Here." Since a new phase of mass protests broke out in Egypt and Tunisia last month, there have been efforts made by so-called political leaders to ignore the mass strike or try, by force, to keep it contained. The news media has, despite solidarity rallies across the globe, waved their hands to argue that the case of Tunisia, of Egypt, of Bahrain, and Wisconsin are entirely unrelated, just a problem with a dictator here and there. These so-called authorities, first of all, have no idea what kind of social process they're dealing with, and secondly, everything they try to do to hold power is merely fanning the flames of mass revolt. As Rosa Luxemburg wrote in her 1906 pamphlet, The Mass Strike, we're dealing with a social process which is not arbitrary, or something that can be turned on and off by political will or brute force, but a process that has its roots in specific conditions which make the outburst a historical inevitability. The mass strike is not artificially made, not decided at random, not propagated, but it is a historical phenomenon which, at a given moment, results from social conditions with historical inevitability. It is not, therefore, by abstract speculations on the possibility or impossibility, the utility or the injuriousness of the mass strike, but only by an examination of those factors and social conditions out of which the mass strike grows. In other words, it is not by subjective criticism of the mass strike from the standpoint of what is desirable, but only by objective investigation of the sources of the mass strike from the standpoint of what is historically inevitable that the problem can be grasped or even discussed. So again, the media and political leaders have no idea what is broken out under their noses and are trying to ignore a global mass revolt which has come on now as a historical inevitability. It has come on now as a result of the continuous choice of global policy, increasingly since the post-war period and the death of Franklin Roosevelt, and the decisions on the part of subsequent heads of state to go along with policies which were designed with the limited lifespan we're seeing expire now. Those decisions have brought us to the inevitable death of that system. So either we replace that dead system by restoring a functional system based on Glass-Steagall, national credit creation, and restoring physical production to nations, or what is now the inevitable death of that system without those changes will create conditions worldwide that are even worse than what we see today. So then we go to the source of today's mass strike. Helga Zepp-LaRouche, chairwoman of the German Büsow Party, said this afternoon that the common denominator is that people globally are reacting to the fact that the system is bankrupt, and it is a process that has taken decades to come to the fore. She continued, when the people perceive that the authorities who have been in power for decades and ages no longer have it, they begin to develop courage, and you get this strange phenomena where people key off each other. We are at a point where the mass strike is developing momentum. And the fight, now that more people are responding to the fact that the conditions in their state or country have become intolerable, is to recognize and eradicate what was acting over decades to create the crisis. As the LaRouche Democrats said in their most recent statement, it's the British system that stands as the unseen obstacle to true economic progress and freedom. Right now, what is mostly driving daily political developments are individual actors, like the individual governors and heads of state who are merely playing their part in a drama that was already written for them. They're obeying the script without a thought. And now these mere actors are resorting to fascist thuggery to try to control an opposition that they cannot keep quiet or understand. Last night at the Madison, Wisconsin State House, Nick Milroy, a Democratic Assembly member, was trying to get back to his office inside the State House. The entire inside of the Capitol building has been shut off to protesters for days. When he approached the door to get inside, he was tackled by Capitol Police before he was even able to show them his ID card. This is fascist thuggery, and it is coming implicitly from Governor Scott Walker. Milroy has remarked publicly that he doesn't blame the police, he says were just doing their job, but he said Governor Walker is 100% responsible for what happened last night, and he is 100% responsible for what happened over the last couple of weeks. In addition, Walker has now issued the threat to the state Democrats that if they do not return to Wisconsin, he would issue 1,500 layoff notices to state workers. This in addition to Walker's attempt, through a vote among Republicans, to send the Wisconsin police force after the Democrats for contempt and disorderly conduct. The director of the Wisconsin Professional Police Association responded, "The thought of using law enforcement officers to exercise force in order to achieve a political objective is insanely wrong, and Wisconsin sorely needs reasonable solutions and not potentially dangerous political theatrics." No longer is there an appeal to reason with the population. There's not even an attempt to lure them into credulousness. These fools like Scott Walker, Chris Christie, and the rest of them are the walking dead. They are continuing to go in the direction assigned to them without thought of what the consequences are of what they're doing. And their attitude to the population, like other dictators, is it is so because we say it is so. They have no concept of what they're dealing with in the population. And you imagine them sticking their in a fire hose thinking they're going to stop the flood. If you want to stop the flood, that's not the way to do it. In the 6-candidate statement, Tyrants Beware, they make clear that it is only by bringing in revolutionary policies for the benefit of the people that the mass strike can be guided to progress. Those policies begin with removing Obama from office under the 25th Amendment, re-implementing the Glass-Steagall law to destroy Wall Street and London, and creating a credit system based on the Glass-Steagall standard to launch the most technologically and scientifically developed projects, beginning with the building of the North American Water and Power Alliance as a precursor for space colonization. The slate of 6 conclude, "Only with this policy can this ongoing storm turn into a revolution based on universal ideas rather than blood in the streets."
Nation of the head of the London School of Economics? A good start. With that, you should mark your calendar for next Thursday, March 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, for LaRouche's webcast, Ireland and America. Be sure to watch the just posted trailer for the webcast, contribute generously online to our fight, and stay tuned for further developments. We leave you with some more remarks from Lyndon LaRouche's weekly report. This is Spencer Cross, signing off.
And so, therefore, people who are sane are not thinking about 2012, not under the present president. They're thinking about getting rid of this present regime under this president and under similar things in Europe. Because the rate of inflation, which is now accelerating, combined with the shortage of food supplies, which is now accelerating, which is already a key feature of the mass strike movement across the transatlantic region. If we don't, within the months ahead, and there are very few months, I fear, do make this reform, you're not going to have a United States and you're not going to have a Europe. And if Europe and the United States go down, then even Asia, such as China and India and so forth, will also go down. So we're now at a point where anybody who is actually competent and sane is going to go with a Glass-Steagall reform in the United States as a strictly 1933 Glass-Steagall law in order to wipe out the existence of Wall Street and similar kinds of afflictions, in order to get the federal government to do what Hamilton did to save the states before the formation of the U.S. Constitution. On that basis, the states will be protected by the federal government, which is the only place our Constitution allows for it to happen. Well, the states will be saved by the federal government. The federal government will then take major projects, which are largely 2 major projects which are on the books for us to do now. One is NWAPA. That's a fairly long-term project, but it means a project which will fairly quickly employ 4 million people. That alone. We have other projects which are necessary to go with that, which coordinate with NWAPA, which is another about maybe 2.5 million people. So we can have a sudden surge of a Roosevelt-style recovery, but on a larger scale, through the combination of taking an area like New York State, northern New Jersey, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, and out to St. Louis. Because that area is the machine tool sector, which the Canada is largely inactive now. But we bring it back because people still have the skills. We're going to build railway systems and similar kinds of systems, high-speed systems, to support and coordinate with the market created by the NWAPA project, which means that we will then be on the road to a Roosevelt-style long-term recovery. And our doing it will create the precedent for Europe to go in a similar direction. In that way, we can come out of that in the course of this year and into next as a process. And then the mass strike will be very happy. And the mass strike will then convert itself into the mass base of support for this process. So that's a choice. We have the mass strike, which goes to a hell process like the French Revolution, or we go into a mass strike process which gets rid of Obama, passes Glass-Steagall, uses Glass-Steagall as a way of saving the states, getting the states back in shape, and secondly, to build the NWAPA project and the auxiliaries. We're on the road to a Roosevelt-style recovery. And it was a recovery which can spread across the Atlantic and can save civilization.